David was at the South by Southwest Coworking Conference in 2011, back when there were only 50 co-working spaces in the world. He even still has a T-shirt. And in this podcast, we talk about this problem that co-working has now. There's a big bias towards design over engagement. Everyone has fancy glass walls. Everyone has sit-stand desks. But the messy spaces are where the magic happens. And David talked about learning improv comedy in Austin at university. It taught him the yes and technique, which I'm sure a lot of you are familiar with. Never shut down an idea on stage. You go yes and keep going. You just keep building it. And that's collaboration. He's just launched this collaboration platform, which we'll put a link in the show notes to, and it's an experiment. It's a collaboration in public. It's a building in public thing, and he built it with AI, and it's live right now. People like you can jump in and build things together. No cost, just get in there. So go to that link in the show notes, folks. And if you go to a website, you can do view source on a website, and that's how David learned to code in the good old days. And that kind of finding out how to make things and leaving messages online is collaboration in public. And you show your work while you're making it, not after it's perfect. This week's episode is in our amazing LinkedIn co-working group. The link is in the show notes to that. And come and tell us about your messiest collaboration. The more of you that dive in there, share thoughts, share ideas, and connect, the better. So without further ado, ladies and gentlemen, let's get into the show. Hey folks, it's today's Co-working Values podcast. I couldn't afford a real singer, but today in the studio is David Walker. What are you known for, David Walker? And what would you like to be known for, David Walker?
Hey, Bernie, thanks so much for having me on your podcast. I just wanted to express a lot of gratitude, not only for you hosting this dialogue, but also all the gratitude for the momentum that other deep dialogues that you've hosted have kind of been building. And so if anything, that's what I want to be known for is how do I take the years of co-working that I've been involved in since 2008, co-founded the first co-working space in Austin, back when there were only 50 spaces in the world and kind of accidentally, became a co-working consultant. And so that, real life experience of co-working kind of helped me introduce the models and the frameworks and the ethos to what became real estate developers. Honestly, as everyone knows, co-working has kind of bridged into the commercial real estate industry, and I've helped with that. But really, where the real beauty is what happens once you build a co-working space, the collaboration that happens and things like that. And so I guess what I want to be known for is collaborating within the industry and within all the pieces of the puzzle, the building blocks of the industry, and helping kind of facilitate that.
There's I'm gonna say I've got to squeeze this in there. If you go to the LinkedIn co-working group, there is a great set of photos that David posted. Can you say about those South by Southwest photos? I can never say that. Those photos from that conference.
Sure. South by Southwest hosted in Austin, and I guess they have little spinoff things in other cities. It's actually ironic you mentioned that, Bernie, because in honor of today's podcast, I know we're not on video, but I'm actually wearing the T-shirt that I got from that South by Southwest Co-working Conference. It's a little old, a little weathered, but it basically says on the front co-work, and on the back are all the members and the groups that kind of came together to help sponsor that event. And that event happened in 2011, and I posted some photos in the co-working group about it, kind of way back when sort of thing, as an old Flickr account. Do people actually use Flickr anymore? I'm not sure, but it was a group of folks that kind of came together around this idea of co-working. Co-working was in its most grittiest stage, where it's really just kind of a bunch of doers and thinkers and disruptors that were gathering together to talk about this idea of co-working. It hadn't really become an industry yet. It was still this kind of co-creating model that we were all co-creating together in different parts of the world. And so it was a wonderful event just to kind of co-catalyze all of our kind of conversations together.
So when you're in that room, because I thought I always thought that actual event happened earlier than it did. And it, what did you, I want to try and say something a bit more exciting than what did you think, David? Because I went to similar kind of conversations in London, and it was really exciting. And there was this like new wave, and if you knew what the word co-working was, and no one really knew what it meant, and what was the? Let me ask you like this: what was your hope for the future of what this co-working thing is at that moment in
Sure.
time?
Yeah. Well, at events like that, I always try to go in with no expectations and just kind of jump into the water and just kind of start swimming. And that event was interesting because I think to a certain extent, like the language around the movement was still kind of happening in siloed conversations. And so this was one of the first times that the conversation could kind of be riffed off of each other. And it was a lot of, oh, you get that. Oh, I get that. Okay, let's keep talking about it and let's evolve the idea and evolve the conversation. And, South by is this great event where all these kind of collisions come together and sharpen each other's kind of mindsets and paradigms. And there were people from all over the world there. I was real lucky that I lived in Austin. And so, I think I biked over to that event. There's a place called The Hangar, which, given the growth of Austin, no longer exists, of course, or maybe it's even owned by some large corporate entity now or PE firm, which is, kind of also the symbol of growth is that it often happens in grassroots movements and kind of then becomes kind of commoditized over the years. But the thing about that event is that it was pre-commoditization, and it was really just fueled by soul and passion and commonality and heart. And that's really what I remember from that event is everyone brought this level of kind of palpable excitement. And that's really, I think, what helped kind of contribute to the movement as a whole.
Because what this collaboration word is like one of the co-working values and everything like that, and it kind of gets thrown away. I used to have on my website, and I was so proud of it. It said like community, co-working, collaboration, and I thought that was the best. And a bit of me still does. And then I was redoing my website, and someone said, "What does that mean?" And then we got into this long conversation about what collaboration actually is, and it's like a very important word, but a very ambiguous word. And then with different people around, there's very few people, and we were talking about this the other day. There's very few people that I've actually collaborated with to the extent and depth. Like me and Emily have a long-term collaboration, and me and Janine and Jax and Kofi, we've collaborated for a long time, and Steve from Faceworks, and I'm sure there's lots of other people I'm missing out, but it's I sometimes feel that people say collaboration and they think if you just put your hand up and say I'm in the co-working world, everyone's going to collaborate with you. How do you, so I suppose the question in there somewhere is like, how do you think people perceive that word?
Yeah. I love unpacking language, and, I'm not sure what the Latin roots are of collaboration, but, that word co is in there, which means together and cooperative, and collaboration, maybe it's something around ideas. I don't know, but, I guess the result of collaboration is sometimes kind of where I start, where it gets me excited. One of my favorite quotes that I probably use a lot is collaboration is multiplication. And I really believe that when two people get together, or three or four or however many, there's this kind of magic that happens. In co-working, they talked about serendipity. And I think the serendipity is the result of co-presence. So when you're around people, serendipitous things start to happen. I think similarly, when you're talking about working on a project or working on an idea, serendipitous activities and things start to happen as well, especially because everyone brings different skill sets to things. I took an improv comedy class years ago when I was in Austin, and there was this one ethos they were teaching us to help us do improv together, and it was the yes and technique. And so it's like when you're on stage with someone and you're kind of just flying by the seat of your pants, and if someone has an idea on the stage, the last thing you're supposed to say is, no, that's a bad idea. And so I think collaboration is all about momentum as well. It's the momentum of ideas. And so when you're in a collaborative state with someone working on something, no idea is a bad idea. You just kind of start riffing off of each other and allow the process to kind of become bigger than the participants. And so that's kind of how I look at it.
Because I've been guilty of this too, but like I like running around talking about community and collaboration, and I sort of do it less now because it's become a kind of, not even become, like it, immediately became a kind of marketing term. Mm-hmm. So people would, if I'm working on someone's communication with them, they always want to put community and collaboration at the top of their website. I said, like, what does that? Are you going to be able? You can promise that, but like, are you going to be deliver that? You can promise coffee because there's definitely going to be a coffee when you get in the room, and you can hand it to someone, but you can't hand someone community and you can't hand someone collaboration. And there's been frequently, I've been in places that are a bit like beaten up and look unattractive, and that's where all the collaboration happens. And people have their hands in the clay, as we like to say. And then the more kind of sterile designed environments that are jacked up on, anything that begins with the letter co are harder to do. And I'm sure most people listening to that have heard that riff enough, but it's a bit like, the promise of community on the internet. It's definitely there, but it's really hard to find. So when you open a community or anything, can say we can give you
right, co this and co that. I think what you're talking about is kind of the messiness of collaboration, and space helps facilitate collaboration if it's designed well. And that's why like hacker spaces and the early co-working spaces and different like labs, they've got stuff in them. They're not sterile environments. Even in the kind of the stereotypical ad agency offices, you've got a lot of quirky little toys and gadgets and art, things that inspire kind of ideas. And so to your point, about people utilizing the word collaboration, sometimes it doesn't happen in these kind of sterile, high design environments, which is, when I talk about the commoditization of co-working, definitely we've moved towards a bias of design over kind of engagement. And I think that definitely has a negative impact on collaboration. People only feel comfortable, like, when I go to a coffee shop, I love coffee shops. It's where the origin of so many of my ideas come from. And I have a lot of friends who are writers, and they love to write in coffee shops. And the coffee shops that appeal to me and a lot of people are the ones that are quirky, have personality, have, some kind of unexpected piece to that environment. And so I think collaboration does need a certain level of rough around the edges and messiness.
I want to jump on that. There's a bias towards design over engagement. Can you say a bit more about that, please? I felt my chest tighten. Now
to compete in the co-working industry, you've got to meet all these basic premises. You've got to have these fancy glass wall systems. You've got to have these cool sit-stand desks. You've got to have the latest technology, and you've got to compete with the multi-million-dollar player down the road. And so there's been this level of upscaleness that has had to happen in the industry in order to exist in the industry. And that's really the irony, that as a space grows in the industry, it kind of has to compete against all the other players, and the messy ones, the rough around the edges ones, can't monetize as well. And so that's why it's kind of this dichotomy of irony that the original ethos of co-working has kind of it's starting to see a different reflection in the mirror, and it doesn't know what to do.
Yeah, I've got this. Like, I'm pretty obsessed with that consumer story versus the citizen story, and I haven't quite nailed the soundbite I'm looking for, which will then just turn into a consumer thing anyway. But we need to kind of go and find something that looks like we want to buy it, and that's why we need these, shiny spaces. And then I suppose it's a bit like you want to, you want to go out for dinner, but actually your mum's cooking is the best, and
right,
and it doesn't have the same environment. I'm sure there's other ways to spin that, and I will always look for, deliberately look for, like, the cozy little owner managed co-working space any day over, I know, big glass walls. There's been lots of invitations to nicer looking co-working spaces in London, and I've gone, and the people that run them are nice and everything like that, but I always feel really at home where, something that looks a bit smacked up, like a hurricane's just passed through it.
Sure.
And the cutlery doesn't match in the drawers, that kind of thing.
Right.
There's something going on there. There's you said it before we came on. I just got to shout it out in a very, weirdo way. Is you said about this collaborating in public versus building in public, and there's something about when you're in that kind of space where everyone's like getting on with it and hacking it together, like you said earlier, the hacker spaces and all that sort of open source movement. It feels like people are collaborating in public, whereas sometimes, not always, because it would be definitely wrong to say that, sometimes I feel like people walk into a movie set of a much nicer, well-designed space, and they feel like they have to play the part of being in there.
Yep.
And they're kind of
I think that this collaborating in public, is at the end of the day, co-working, the movement was never just about the desks. It was rethinking how people work and how they connect and how they create, and even co-create. And that's really what happens in those spaces. And, the software industry, that whole movement was around, like, I remember I started designing websites when I was 16. And the way that I learned was I would click view source, and you could just view the source of any website. And you can still do it today, but that just simple feature, which I'm sure software engineers created so that people could learn from each other. It's all about showing the process, showing the building blocks, kind of transcending the privateness of creation in order to innovate and grow and iterate. And I think that the collaboration of ideas and collaborating in public is so key, because if everyone's trying to build their own thing behind some sort of stealth NDA, well, then you don't have the opportunity to come together and make it better together.
And every time we get people together, we deliberately stop running events where there's like a speaker on the stage or a panel, because all that information, most panels, you can, ask it in AI, what does David Walker think about cheese and onion crisps and, ham sandwiches or something, but then the like good panels are Q&As from the audience and everything like that. And then when we do things where everyone's talking to each other and building together, and however you want to spin it for the purposes of this podcast, but like building in public and collaborating in public, that is what gives people huge amounts of energy. And that's, whereas when it's like, here's the spoon-fed version of what we want you to do, that could have been a YouTube video, an angel doesn't get his wings.
Right. Well, it's interesting, on that, like when I watch YouTube videos about like speakers, sometimes I'll fast forward to the Q&A, when the audience actually gets involved, because in a way that's when the real conversation starts, like it's like in a jam session with musicians. It's when they stop playing what they prepared and they start just kind of riffing together, and often that magic is created. And so, I've always thought that collaboration happens through randomness, and you can never expect it. Everyone talks about how co-working, the early phrase was engineering serendipity. And so when you put people together in a room together, united by certain values, that there is this kind of magic that happens. And so I've always thought about, well, how can you help facilitate that by offering, a software or an infrastructure or some way to do it? And, I never would have been able to do it until I started working with AI, and I started, with like the rest of the world, vibe coding. And I've kind of become a software developer that also embodies the ethos of the co-working kind of mindset. And so I've witnessed all these incredible collaborations happen to build spaces. And, that's one thing not to underestimate. It's like when you go into a movie and then you see all the credits at the end of the movie, you're like, wow, this was a heck of a collaborative project. And it comes together, but think about all the conversations and all the moving parts and all the kind of riffing that people had to do in order to get to that point. And so I was like, well, how do you create a platform where people could riff together and explore together? And so with the help of AI, I kind of started to build one. And that's something that I was kind of introducing in concept in this spirit of build in public, build in collaboration. I kind of released it in beta form. It's actually usable right now. And I would love for people to just start kind of collaborating and seeing what happens.
That terrified me when you said that. Like I think I haven't seen someone do that for a long time. And to say, here's my thing, dive in. It's the sort of thing like Noah Kagan or Seth Godin would have chucked up on the internet in 2008.
Well, Seth Godin, I remember when he did something interesting, he wrote a bunch of blog posts and then he released the book that was really a compilation of all the blog posts. So he was creating the book as he was going. I don't even know if he knew he was writing a book as he was doing the blog posts. But that's the idea, is you just got to get stuff out there,
Was that Small is the New Big?
Yeah, it was.
That's great. That's such a good book. I'm going to start reminiscing about that. But how can we get involved with that thing? Because that's like, there's something there, and if we all just pass over it, nothing would happen. But if we're like, I think it, we were talking about this the other day. It's like being brave enough to like dive in there, and maybe get, maybe it won't work at all. But like being brave enough to dive in there and contribute would, if everyone went in there at the same time and did something, it would create a ripple at least.
Yeah. I've got this kind of community of industry kind of players called the Coworking Ecosystem Network that I've been kind of helping gather together. It's coworkingecosystem.network instead of .com. And so there's a blog post I wrote recently about what I'm calling E squared, which is the kind of ecosystem engine of sorts. And so it's not just for the co-working industry, but really for anyone that vibes with the ethos of co-working, which is around collaboration and community and vulnerable co-creation, honestly. And so there's a link to it there where people can jump in and check it out. And it's actually built on a vibe coding software, which is Firebase Studio. And so it's embedded with AI. So if you don't have an idea for a collaboration, it can help you come up with an idea, and you just share the initiative, and then people can opt in to the initiative and then work on it together. And I even created this other kind of beta thing where it's called co-working with me, co-working with .me. And so it's just this idea of being able to hop in a random room together with a random person and start talking to each other in a meeting room. And so the idea is that you post these initiatives, these collaborations, you join in, and then you co-work together and kind of iterate it together. And there's a chat room and brainstorming tools, and so the whole thing, it's not monetized. There's no cost to use it. Really, if anything, the cost is really just the leap that it takes to get in the water and see what happens.
There's I have tried, and you should definitely go and try it, folks. But I've tried to do that online co-working thing so many times, and it never works for me. And I know, like 5 people. There was I can't remember the name of the platform, but there was like 5 people I would WhatsApp with online. But when we all got in the same room together, I just didn't know what to do. It's not even I didn't know what to do, but like I found it so hard to get into it. And I was thinking, and there was like little rooms you could, was it whatever it was called? You could go, you could sit at a desk, and that meant you didn't want to talk to someone, and then you could both go to a meeting room and have a what we call a Zoom room now. And it was amazing, and I was so upset it didn't work. It's like being
I think that's the idea with collaboration, is that when you try to box it into something, it takes the air out of the room. And so that's one of the reasons that I'm trying to just kind of share it and iterate it and build it as I go to kind of react and respond to how people utilize it, et cetera. I mean, at the end of the day, people do need some form of, like, I can't join a co-working space in London to go collaborate with the people there. People can't join a co-working space in all these places, but there's all these kind of disparate collaborators with this energy to co-create something. And so it's like, how do you kind of just give people the opportunity to test it out? And that's really what the experiment is. When I launch things and share things, they're always experimental. And I think that that's really part of the magic of collaboration, is being experimental and having that experimental mindset that hackers have, or that people in laboratories have. It's like, well, what happens when you combine this and this, and let's try this. And so really it's an experiment in collaboration.
I do think if someone sent me a thing and says 8,000, I mean, there's 8,000 people in the LinkedIn group, so that shoots myself in the foot straight away. But if someone said to me, come on, 20,000 co-workers are in this, I don't want to be like, that's just exhausting. It was a thing I was in, it was a Slack channel, and there was like 1,500 people in it. And I just couldn't do it. And then if someone says, there's another group I'm in, which is about 40 people, I really like that. I feel I can give my time to at least half of those people and build a relationship. So the smaller it is way more attractive to me these days, rather than like, we're the biggest, whatever it is in the world.
Right. Yeah, absolutely. And that's the beauty of having just launched the idea, is there are not thousands of users. In fact, I just launched it a week or so ago. And so it's still at its early stages. And so it's really just a chance, honestly, at this point, for co-working people to get into it and start riffing together. And it could be small ideas like, hey, let's build a mechanism to create music playlists so that other co-working spaces can play these playlists at their co-working space. Or it could be a big initiative like, how do we band together as co-working minded people and try to solve world hunger together? How can we start food drives at our co-working spaces through some sort of like methodology and shared wiki or Google Doc? And so I don't have like high expectations for anything happening other than helping people just, in a way, I've created the pool for people to come swim in. And, I'll keep building the pool and making the pool better. But at the end of the day, it's all about people getting in the water.
As you're talking there, I was thinking of when Meetup first happened, and I joined Meetup in 2008, and it was, and we actually did a Meetup in London. Scott, the founder, came, and I was in this at a desk in my friend's office, which had a huge event space, and every so often he'd say, if I turned up with the right thing, he'd say, "Yes, you can have our huge event space for your antics, Mitchell." And we had something like 150, like a lot of Meetup organizers turn up. And Scott said, "Can you just go around the room and say, what your Meetup is?" And so you'd say like, "Oh, I'm David. I'm the, indoor gardeners Meetup." And we went around the room, and some of those Meetups, which were like, thousands of people, and some of them were like 20 people, but it was amazing the diversity. There was a doctors, there's a Meetup run by doctors and nurses from London Hospital, which is in Whitechapel, and they ran a soup kitchen on Meetup for people that were like not at risk enough to qualify for support from the government, but they were like heading in that direction. And there was like union meetups, there was London Shy Meetup, there was property meetups, there were language meetups,
right,
cooking meetups, and a lot of businessy things as well, violin players meetups. And they'd always been happening, but those people like found each other through that platform. And some of the specific, like London Shy Meetup, is a group of people that are very shy, but they know they need to get out there. So they would meet up and go to the cinema together and may or may not say anything to each other while they're doing it. They were just very shy, and they found their people. And, it was amazing, the connections that happened. And probably that event that happened is the most accurate representation of London I've ever seen in front of my face in one place. It was beautiful.
Yeah. When Meetup launched, I used to love just going on meetup.com and searching for upcoming meetups, and it's like, oh, I can just show up and meet people around shared ideas. And that was highly disruptive, in a way. Like, I see co-working as a way to kind of transcend the stranger society. It's like you show up, you can't go to a coffee shop and start talking to people because you're not allowed to. It's against the social norm. Or you can't show up in a London tube and start talking to people. I learned that the hard way. And, at the end of the day, collaboration isn't really, it can't be forced, but with these kinds of meetups or platforms, collaboration itself becomes the content. And I think that's the radical shift, because it's not about, the outcome, but the process that really kind of is the magic, a place where, you can see that messy middle and be a part of the middle. And when you go to the meetup groups, you don't really know why you're there. You just know that you're showing up, and the polished result isn't the goal. It's just the idea of showing up and seeing what happens.
Beautiful. Let's how can we we'll put all the links in the show notes, but how can we get, for people that are like doing the hoovering or running or washing up, like how do we find where to get involved in all these
Sure.
things?
Yeah. Well, I help build co-working spaces, and so with a variety of folks. And so you can learn more about my business at coworkingconsulting.com there. And then also I'm trying to help bring together in collaboration the co-working industry through different initiatives and directories. And you can learn about that at coworkingecosystem.network. And it's there on coworkingecosystem.network that I've got a live link to the beta version of the ecosystem engine, E2, I call it. And so it's there. And I would just love for people to just drop in and check it out. But if anything, just to engage in this discussion around collaboration, because I think that as our world is becoming more AI centric, we're all becoming builders and experimenters. And I think that is kind of the beauty as we're evolving our kind of co-creative abilities that we can kind of co-create together, whether or not we're building co-working spaces or building new ideas together.
I definitely feel that energy in the air. That's it's a new dawn. So
right.
Thanks. We're going to put all that in the show notes, folks. We also have in those show notes, we'll put this podcast in the co-working LinkedIn group, and other people who run podcasts also put their things in there, put their podcasts in there. And there's a lot of things you've been listening to this podcast today and gone, oh, I really agree with that, or they're wrong with that. So go and say that in the LinkedIn group. And then Fanny and Mark Navarro and Susan and Caleb put their podcasts in there too. And every time, I promise you this, I've done lots of podcasts. Every time you record a podcast, there's other things you wish you could add or say, or wouldn't really make sense if you carried it in the conversation. So we can carry on all that in there in a nice little collaborative way. Also, folks, we'll have a link to Unreasonable Connection, which is our once a month online event and that is, seamless link here. Not face-to-face because it's online, but like one-to-one collaboration where it's about 40 minutes of being in a online room with 3 to 4 other people talking about whatever comes up. We frame it with a question, and if you go off topic in your group, that's fine. But we have definitely found that people talking to each other about what is the highs and lows of running a co-working community together are what happened in there. And I'm sure there's something else, but that's enough of a outro. So wherever you are in the world, be careful out there. It is a jungle.
Thanks, Bernie. I appreciate it.